just a way that we can take the money that we make and put it back into the community. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank publicly, once again, Dave Berthium, who does a great job. He's just, and the other Lions as well help, but I mean, he really spearheads this thing. So Saturday night, 7 to 9, Andrews Hall, a fun time for everybody, and we have some wonderful meat that folks will win, rather than little trinkets that Bob remembers from Wayland Park, because he used to try to shoot all that stuff. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to come before you.
Thank you. Good luck with the event.
Thanks.
Okay. It's 7 p.m. Do we have, no, he's not here yet. Let's do the requests for the Unitil. Can we do those?
Okay, and I have one warrant article too that we could take up.
Oh, well, sure.
Okay. Well, I'll just pass those down. So under agenda item 1, warrant articles, I have a sheet coming down on Article 13. This is the AFSCME contract, which you approved. Oh.
You're allowed to see it.
You can keep one?
Has it been approved?
It has been.
It's already been
it's
voted?
been
I don't even
approved.
know if you guys voted it, so.
Yes. This,
Okay.
you approved this contract a couple of months ago, and Article 13 is a request for town meeting to approve the first year of funding for the contract. The funds are set aside in the salary reserve account, so town meeting will be asked to move the amount of money to cover the first year of the contract from the salary reserve into the departments for which these members are employed, and the total cost of the first year of the contract is $8,851.12. So that's the amount that will be asked to be moved under Article 13.
Okay, but we've already moved to approve this, right?
You did.
So this is just the dollar amount, okay. Thank you. Okay, let's do the request to approve the license agreement for the middle school, high school project for Unitil Corporation.
So these are in your packets. As part of the construction project, both Unitil and Boston Gas, which is National Grid, require easements across the property to locate the utility lines. Licenses are approved by the Board of Selectmen. The easement must be approved by town meeting. So this is something that has been in process for months now. And even though we're only weeks away from town meeting, I am requesting that you approve the licenses, and then town meeting will approve the easements. You might notice that the Unitil agreement, license agreement, has already been signed by the school committee. Originally, we expected that the school committee would have executed both license agreements, which they are able to do for their property. But when we were doing some research to satisfy town council, we weren't able to locate any town meeting action where the school property was turned over to the school committee by town meeting. I'm sure it happened sometime in the 50s, but we weren't able to locate that, so town council said that, excuse me, the Board of Selectmen should approve the licenses, and as part of the motion in the easement, we're going to incorporate the language that would make it official that the school property is under the jurisdiction of the school committee. So killing two birds with one stone. But just to play it safe, both of these are presented to you this evening for approval.
Any questions for the town manager?
Yeah, just a clarifying question. You said killing two birds with one stone. The action will, in fact, now provide the documentation that will show that the school is responsible for that property. I'm thinking I'm thinking in terms of building reuse and all that stuff in the future. Will this kind of put the deed or whatever in the right place?
This will be a record that town meeting has transferred the school property to the school committee.
Fine.
yes.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. The town, not this vote, the license won't, but the town meeting
Right.
vote will.
Correct.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
And when we say the property, what property is it that's going to be transferred?
The school.
Well,
property.
it's,
Passios High School, where are the property lines?
I think it's all.
it
one.
is, there is an assessor's map reference which encompasses the entirety of the school campus.
Right.
Okay.
Including Kids Kingdom?
Yes.
I believe so,
I
including,
mean, I can
Brooks House,
get you
including.
I can get you a copy of the map if you'd like to see it, but
Because I know that when you went through the teen center situation, is that the entire property, I thought, was all one parcel, including the senior center?
the Jones House,
Jones
right.
House, and all
the
that
teen
was all one
center,
property.
yes.
So,
And at some point in the future, we've discussed that the school may in fact want to turn a piece of that back to the town, so I'm just.
Right, but those property lines are not done yet
Correct.
and not part of this, right?
But,
In fact, they can't turn it back to us if they.
well, that's
don't
my
have it.
point, that's my point. Without muddying the water, I want to make sure
Right.
what town meeting does this time makes it theirs to do whatever they're going to do with
Sure.
it in the future.
My understanding is the whole entire campus, as the town manager said.
Okay.
So this should add clarity, not confusion, hopefully.
and this is a pipeline that we can support?
Yes, yes. About that size, yes. So I'd entertain a motion on the Unitil license agreement first. Obviously, town council has reviewed the licensing agreements.
Yes.
Shouldn't say obviously, I should just ask.
Town council has reviewed and/or drafted the licensing agreements.
Okay.
Just for reference, the assessor's map is map 60, parcel 55.
I would move that we approve the license agreement for the middle school, high school project for Unitil Corporation.
Or a second.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
And there are 2 copies to sign.
And there are 2 copies coming down. And while we're signing these, I would entertain a motion about the Boston Gas Company license agreement for the high school, the middle school, high school.
It is the Boston Gas Company?
That is
Isn't
not.
It is, and it's National Grid.
Oh, no.
Okay.
National Grid,
Is-
at least in this area, is known as Boston Gas
Okay,
Company.
Kind of like Fitchburg Gas and Electric.
because I know that we
Is
pay
Unitil.
to National Grid. I move that we approve the license agreement for the middle school, high school project with the Boston Gas Company.
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None.
Copies of
Another
that.
2 copies. Are there any other articles?
There are warrants you can take.
Warrants, okay. Yep. Okay, 1 warrant, an accounts payable warrant in the amount of $30,281.27.
Town meeting warrant.
And we have to sign the official town meeting warrant.
Now, I did
Need
notice.
a vote on this?
I noticed one little error in the warrant package you handed out is.
Oh,
no.
we're not accepting, we're not accepting errors.
No, the error is clearly with your memory. Whatever is in here is what we agreed on.
How little is it?
Date, time, and place, okay? If we've got that, we can correct
It's on
anything
page
else.
21, Article 37, and it talks about our vote. Doesn't affect the final outcome, but it,
What page?
page 21 of the
Yeah,
document.
Oh, yeah.
Article
it's wrong.
37, I believe the 2 against votes were Bertram and Toll, not Bertram and Eversole.
yeah, and by the way, since when did we put who votes against them? We just,
Oh, we've always done.
no,
we've-
no, we've not.
We've always said 3 in favor,
Right.
2
We
against,
always
but
say
not the names.
We've never put the names of who voted against it. Believe me.
I'm not
When I say-
embarrassed, I just
I
don't
don't
want it to
believe
be
we've ever
incorrect.
put the names on.
I'm saying,
We had quite the discussion about including names.
I don't recall
I don't recall it
seeing
ever
names.
saying that. I mean, I don't care, but, I mean, it's a public vote, so it's not like we're disclosing anything. But we've never had them before.
And the other point, just a point of interest, is I thought we agreed that the circle was coming off the map.
Yes, I thought we agreed that as well. And it came up at
Clearly-
the planning
clearly it
board
isn't.
last, it came up at the planning board last night as well, because there's definitely some confusion as to what exactly the village district is.
Right.
And
Okay,
so,
well, we included what was submitted, so
But
it
in
was
the-
not
right.
resubmitted.
Right.
But
So
in
we
the,
have
in
to-
the meeting with the planning board that we talked about, we asked if they could please take the circle off.
Obviously, they didn't do it in time, because
So what-
obviously we were up against time constraints about sending the warrant.
whatever handout we have for
Right.
town meeting,
The handout has to be the clear one.
Okay, we have the election warrant, annual election warrant.
Annual election warrant. How many are there of this? 6? Yes. Third quarter water department bills, okay. Whoops. Sorry, Paula. I started signing on the wrong line.
Not a problem.
I'm sure it invalidates everything.
I'm going to start sending them to you.
okay.
Any minutes?
No.
And any action files? I just want to clear that line. Anybody have any action file issues?
Yes, I do have an action file issue.
Okay.
This afternoon, I received a call from Ryan McNutt, the Lancaster Town Administrator. He asked me if I had any questions about the Lunenburg Water District's intentions with Lancaster. He let me know that some time ago, the Lunenburg Water District installed a line about 1,000 feet away from Lancaster on Lunenburg Road, and that's the line they plan to extend into Lancaster. Lancaster's private sector, he told me, is driving this expansion request and is on board with funding the infrastructure. The private sector is going to fund the infrastructure. Lack of water has been a barrier to expansion for them. They are working with Hannigan Engineering of Leominster to understand what infrastructure will be required. Lancaster has asked for 350 to 450 gallons per day. And according to data supplied by the Lunenburg Water District back in their report in 2005, Lunenburg's whole daily average usage in 2005 was 460 gallons a day. Just to put it in perspective.
460, I'm sure that's not,
460,000.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
and what is Lancaster asking?
Lancaster is asking for 350 to 450,000 gallons a day,
So the
Which is equivalent of what we have.
Equivalent of what we have.
which was equivalent of what our daily average usage in 2005.
Okay, so 10 years ago.
So just to, give you, put it in some perspective.
Right, so not insignificant.
Not, right, exactly.
And they asked them to use Title V requirements when they were trying to figure this out, how much they wanted. Fran McNamara told them that was no problem. As far as Ryan McNutt is aware, codifying the expansion of the Lunenburg Water District should take a couple of months. Once that's all set, Lancaster will need to get the infrastructure in place. Brian told me that he'd gotten a great deal of information from the Lunenburg Water Department. I asked if he could forward that to me, and he's going to look into it. So I would propose that we send a letter to Senator Flanagan and Representative Benson, and that we ask them to put this on hold until we are able to have our questions answered. And I have a copy of it for you there.
When do we tentatively have the water commissioners coming to?
I asked them about May 12th and May 19th.
So it's not determined yet?
No.
Okay.
Obviously, this is a big issue, and hearing the volume of water we're talking about, I have a number of questions as far as, what basin, we have 2 medium stress basins in Lunenburg, what the impact is, not only on individuals within the water district, but private wells. We have had water bans in the past, and those water bans are triggered by stream flow and pepperel. Understanding potential impacts, there's a lot of issues that we need to address. So I think that sending a letter asking that no act be taken by the legislature before we have our concerns answered makes sense. There is, my husband pointed it out today, there is a Facebook page now devoted to this issue where a number of residents are expressing concern. So I think that the sooner that we could meet with the water district, the better.
And I also received an email from a concerned resident.
We've had several that have been sent to individuals and then to the board as a whole. And, with the current events being what they are, what we're seeing going on in places like California, which is obviously an extreme, but, water is a very, very important resource, and
They're not making any more of it.
and I think it's a resource that the town owns.
Mm-hmm.
And while the Lunenburg Water District is run by commissioners who are elected, it's not part of the town government. And I've said before, and I'll take this opportunity to say again, I think that's something we may want to revisit as a town, because this is to me, this is a big commitment to further the economic development of another town, which I'm not sure that I quite understand the reasoning behind. I'm more than happy to, I haven't drawn any conclusions. I want to hear from the water commissioners, but it's obviously a serious step that I think more of the town should be involved in.
I know that Carrie has said that there are other parts of Lunenburg that could use that service.
Sure.
So why wouldn't?
Well, I think those are the questions to ask.
We had to make special provisions at the DPW facility
Uh-oh.
when we expanded it because we don't have, we didn't have, I don't want to say we didn't have an adequate water supply, but we didn't have the supply we needed to have, I think, the sprinkler system. So we had to have a waiver from the fire department for that.
So I'm certainly in favor of the letter going out. I mean, we certainly want to hear. It doesn't do anything except ask them to wait till we've met with them.
Yeah.
Right.
So-
Right.
Right.
Great, thank you.
I support that.
Do we need a motion or something?
Mr. Rogers?
May I
Sure,
speak to this issue?
sure.
Thank you. First of all, as you know, I do not have a twin brother, thank God. And I was here before you talking about the Lions Club. And I then went to the Lions Club meeting. My wife called me and said, they're talking about the water situation, so probably a good idea for you to come here. So the first question I have is, what happened to good old civility? Dave, before you go, we've got something we'd like to talk to you about. Or could you stay? Why? Do we have something to hide? I don't. Do you? I hope not.
I brought it up under action items because that's the appropriate place to bring it up.
Yeah, it wasn't an agenda item.
Public comment? Comment from the board? I mean, I just think that that's really a short-sighted way of doing this.
I feel the same way about the Lunenburg Water Department
Do you?
district not informing us. Yes.
Okay, how so?
You've been conducting business with Lancaster for months, discussing this, without a word to us.
why should we talk to you about this? Because there was nothing
There we go.
going on.
There we go.
There was nothing going on.
You voted at your annual meeting.
We did. And were you there? Because I didn't see you.
And
Were
where
you there,
are
Bob?
the notices, where are the notices for the meeting posted? They're not posted the way the town does, where we send it out to every resident.
Bob,
Let's talk about transparency. The water district.
Transparency?
I would have to know when the annual meeting is. I should have done it. God knows I'm going to be doing it going forward in the future.
sure, it was posted in the Fitchburg Sentinel like it always is.
I don't get the Sentinel.
What can I tell you?
Well, that's right.
But as a member of the Water District, and I would share that concern, I certainly wasn't aware that the annual meeting was March 28th, nor was I aware that you would be voting on sending water to another community.
It was posted.
Well, you know, when we talk about transparency, I mean, as you know, when we send the town warrant out, we don't only just post it in one time. We have a dialogue, we send notices out, you mail out the annual report to members of the Water District. When you're talking about such an important issue, which is, you know, the possible outsourcing of 300,000 to 400,000 gallons of water, to say it's simply posted in the Sentinel one time, that's not transparent to me.
Well, let me just, you know, get some things on the table here. You have a relative that is a commissioner on the board.
And as soon as I found out about this issue, I contacted
Why
them.
didn't you call me, Paula? You could
Because
have.
I contacted my relative, as you said.
Okay. You and I have called. The point is, I'm in the phone book. You can call me anytime. But let's get to the crux of the issue. The crux of the issue is this. First and foremost, I'm happy to talk with each and every one of you anytime there's something that I can talk to you about. This was the first step in order to get the process going.
After
okay?
months of negotiations.
No, that's not true.
I mean, that's what the paper said.
Well, do you
That's-
believe everything that you read in the paper? Because if you do, you know, you better check with the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus and everybody else, too.
Well, Ryan McNutt told me today when he called me that you've been discussing this for months.
We've had 2 meetings, I believe, okay? The way you come across this, like we're in closed-door session and we're talking about this, let's get to, as I said, the crux of the issue, okay? First and foremost, the water recharge area that we're talking about comes from Lancaster. That's how our well, the so-called Keating well, is recharged. It's got nothing to do with Lunenburg water per se.
It's very close to Lake Shirley, and that whole area is sand and gravel.
What's that got to do with the recharge
I think
area?
water moves pretty quickly through sand and gravel. It's not bedrock.
This will be an agenda item. I mean, I'm more than happy to have you, I don't want you to leave thinking that you didn't get a chance,
I
or
didn't.
anybody in the board. No, okay.
Didn't.
Okay,
well,
so we will have an agenda item on this. So I don't want this to be preempting what we're going to be meeting with the water commissioners about. But I do want, because it's come up now, I do want people to be able to speak to some degree about it, but I just
Sure.
want to point out that there'll be a full discussion about
Absolutely.
this, okay?
Absolutely. And that's how we do business, okay?
That would be great.
Listen, I've been a water commissioner for 40 years, if
I
you can
heard
believe
that.
it. You heard that?
Yes.
Okay, and well, I'm sorry that you're so impressed. Let me get to the issue here. Lancaster came to us and said, this is the situation, okay? We would like to develop this particular area, but we don't have any water. Would you be interested in talking to us about that? We said, certainly, under one condition. And the primary condition is this, that it not cost the Lunenburg Water District a nickel. Not a nickel. And all of the work that is proposed to be done, when and if it is done to our standards. And once the water is in place, if it is in place, we get the revenue. The Lunenburg Water District gets the revenue. Okay? So it's, you talk about a win-win situation. I mean, what is wrong with that?
Who's going to own the property, the pipes?
We are,
So we're going to have a maintenance cost going forward?
yes.
Okay.
For which we are going to be paid monthly, just like everybody else in the Lunenburg Water District is paid.
My concern is not in the financial, obviously, as a member of the Water District, I'm concerned about the finances, and you've addressed that component, briefly tonight. My concern is the impact on the water withdrawal rates, our DEP permit, possible water bans. My understanding after looking at the Water District website is that water bans are triggered by stream flow and Pepperell, understanding how that works, what impact this recharge area, understanding the recharge areas. That's the information. Both Catacoonamog and Mulpus are medium stress basins, meaning they're net exporters of water, understanding if there's going to be any derogatory impacts from this. So understanding that, as well as what volume is available, what the capacity issues are of the well, those are my questions, not necessarily the financial
I couldn't agree more,
components.
Paula. I couldn't agree more. And those are all the questions that we have. But in order to do this, what we did was to get it, first of all, so that we could, at some particular point in time, if everything was okay, that we could expand. We share the same concerns. And very frankly, I take exception to anyone who thinks that we don't do a good job, who thinks that we would do something underhanded. All you have to do is call us. You call DEP, why wouldn't you call us? You call, this doesn't make sense.
We did contact us as soon as we heard about it, and which was in the paper. We didn't hear about it from the Water District. We read it in the paper. And as soon as we read it in the paper, the town manager reached out to Fran McNamara and asked for an appointment. So we did contact you.
You didn't contact me. You didn't contact me.
I contacted another commissioner, and the board requested a meeting.
After it came out.
Sure. But you know what? As the guy says, I was born at night, but I wasn't born last night. What really gets me about this thing is I was here. Why didn't you say something to me then? Rather than saying, well, this is what we want to talk about, which is perfectly okay, but out of common courtesy.
I feel the same way about the Water District.
How so?
That it would have been common courtesy to discuss it with us before Lancaster, or certainly before we saw it in the paper.
So let's
before
talk
you voted
about that
at
a
your
little
annual
bit.
meeting.
Are you saying that we need to get the Board of Selectmen's approval on this?
No, we're talking about common courtesy.
And how did we do anything different than we normally have? The answer is we didn't.
Maybe you're just not courteous.
Oh, here we go. Isn't this nice? You know what? We're going to cease this right now, because I'm not going to stand here and let you or anybody else tell me that I am not courteous. After all the time I have spent doing all the things in this town, you have the audacity to tell me that I'm not courteous? The conversation is done, okay? We look forward to meeting with you. We'll have an agenda item. We'd be happy to have you over to our office where you can see all of the maps, all the equipment that we have, and we can go in great detail. At a minute's notice, we can get you all that you need. And I am sorry. No, I'm done.
But it's a public meeting.
Done.
It will be a public meeting.
Absolutely.
And I hope that you have the facilities to accommodate the public if you choose to have the district in the meeting.
You know what, Paula? You haven't been over there for years. Of course we do. What we do is we take the car, the trucks and the backhoes out, and we set up some chairs.
Can we, as the Board of Selectmen, have a meeting in a non-municipal building?
Of course you can.
As long as it's in town.
Of course you can.
Their
I'm
building
asking a
is,
question of the
And
town
I just
manager.
gave you the answer. Of course you can.
Okay,
their
Dave,
building is a
I don't
Oh, wait a
want
minute.
this
You've
to...
got my riled up now.
Mr.
Tell-
Rogers,
Mr.
Mr.
Rogers,
Rogers, please, would you show this board the same respect you're requesting? Please?
How so, sir? This lady says maybe I'm not doing the things that I should be.
I've asked you to show the board the respect that you're requesting.
I thought that I did until somebody cast aspersions on me and my character.
But I did not cast aspersions on you and your character, and you are, and nor do I think that Mrs. Luck did. I think
Well,
that
you know what?
started...
This is clearly not, first of all, not an agenda item. This is not a productive conversation, because now this has just gotten into ad hominem things. I think we should just stop it here.
That's what I want to do.
We should have the agenda item when we make the arrangements, whether it's here or at your location, that's fine, we'll make it public. Then we can sit down and talk things substantively and on both sides, not emotionally. That's all, I just want to talk about, the project that's going on. That's all I want to talk about.
And I think that's a great idea, Tom. And I just want everybody to know that I cannot talk with any certainty about what's going on, because we're not there yet. This is in the absolute infancy, okay? And we have to go through DEP with all kinds of things that we have to do, okay? And we plan on doing that. We truly do, like we always have. What upsets me is, I was here, we should have said something, the rest is history. If you, Jamie, feel that I have been disrespectful to this board, please accept my apologies, because it's not my position to ever be disrespectful to people that serve the town as you have. And you know what? On the flip side of this, I serve the community as well, okay? So when somebody tells me what I heard, it really gets my dander up, okay? But let's move on. I look forward to sitting down with anybody that wants to hear. But the thing is, and I want to say this again, there's not much that I can report on because it's in the infancy. There's all kinds of things that have to be done, okay?
Thank you.
This is for your signature.
7:15, right on time. Police chief is going to be talking about three proposed warrant articles. I see he has brought the lieutenant. Welcome to both of you. And I guess the best way to do this is jump right in. So I guess we should start out by saying what the article numbers are.
39, 40, 41.
Okay, so that's 39 and, actually there's 4, right?
Yes.
Okay, I made the mistake. It's my mistake. I said 3, but there's 4. Is there any particular order you want to take these in, beside numerically, which would be an obvious one, but maybe we don't want to do that?
I thought maybe we'd go in order by this letter that town council had sent us, because it outlines some of the questions on the articles, and it may help me to either to explain, answer those questions, or maybe dispel any.
Just dated,
It's not actually.
okay, so it's the one that refers to the Whalum Lake article as Article 20, when it was
Yes.
okay.
Exactly.
The article number,
Article 39.
I'm going to let Lieutenant Luce speak to the sex offender article. He's a sex offender registrar, and
So,
he's more of an expert at
that's fine.
that subject than I am.
So the first thing, when we go through the articles, the first thing people are going to want to know, and I think it would be good, would just talk about the purpose and the scope. Like, what is the purpose of bringing the article forward at all? And then we can get into the details.
Okay.
I know a lot of these articles that you've proposed have a section
So Article 20.
called purpose, but not all of them do.
Let me just speak about, or just remind everybody here about the history of the Whalum Lake prohibition on vehicles driving on frozen waters. There was an article, a town bylaw, that was originally intended to allow the Board of Selectmen to license certain people to drive motor vehicles on the lake. And that, the bottom line is there was ice racing going on back in those days. And the Board of Selectmen had the power to permit the organizations who organized the ice racing. And I think that was the original intent of the law. And 2 years ago, some of the residents of Whalum Lake complained that they weren't allowed to ride snow machines or snowmobiles on the lake because that law actually prohibited them from doing so. So with that, in front of town meeting, I rescinded, I spoke, and the law was on the matter, and the law was rescinded by town meeting. At that time, I had said that I would come back and rewrite the law because I felt that having motor vehicles, cars, drive on the ice was kind of a dangerous proposition and quite possibly a liability to the town if we didn't do something to stop it. So that's how this Whalum Lake bylaw was born. And maybe to help it survive, I'll just explain maybe a few of the questions that came up about it. Well, one of the things was originally when I wrote this, I had added hours of operation, and that met with some immediate disapproval, and understandably so. So since I'm, when I serve soup, you can ask for salt and I won't get mad at you. I decided, well, yeah, that was probably a good idea to take that out, because the, chapter 272, section 53, the disturbing the peace law, allows us some discretion to enforce that piece of it anyway. So if somebody's out on a lake after, say, 7 o'clock at night and they're not really disturbing anybody's peace, so be it. If they are, and it seems like it's not reasonable, and that's what the case law and the acts and resolves state, is that, there has to be this reasonableness factor to the component to the disturbing the peace charge. So I just thought I'd leave it at that, and we wouldn't enforce it on that basis. So I took that out. Secondly, there's some question as to public access. So we wrote in there that public access can only be made on the lake, on Whalum Lake, in Leominster, at the boat ramp in Leominster. Now, most of the land around Whalum Lake is in Lunenburg, but that piece is in Leominster. So public access has to be made there. Well, there was a question about, well, what if I want to cross private lands? And there is a provision that says you can cross somebody's private property as long as you have written permission from the landowner, or some kind of permission from the landowner. So I added to the bylaw that, just that, you could cross private properties as long as you had written permission by the landowner. The original intent on great ponds, and Whalum Lake is a great pond, it's 99 acres, or 99.1 acres. The original intent, way back in the acts and resolves, the way that law was written that governed great ponds was that you were supposed to allow people to cross private lands anyway, but it was only for the purpose of fishing. Then it got expanded to boating, and the regulations got expanded to regulate. We were given the authority to regulate boating and internal combustion engines, just boating in general. What it doesn't do, and what the lawyer points out, with the authority, it may be questionable that we might not be allowed the authority to regulate motor vehicles, according to the lawyer's notes here. However, there was a case I believe it was in Plymouth, where there was a great pond that somebody wanted to land a plane on. And the selectmen in Plymouth, or the aldermen, or whatever form of town government they have, they had decided, well, no, we're going to regulate that. I mean, that's a plane landing on a great pond. And they attempted to do that. And they actually were successful. The bylaw did survive, but the Attorney General said to them, look, you really don't have the authority to do this unless the FAA approves it. So I'm thinking, if, worst case scenario, this bylaw is approved, the Attorney General may say, well, maybe, the Department of Environmental Police have to approve this bylaw. Or maybe Mass Conservation has to approve it. Because there are some conservation issues involved with cars actually going through the ice, and, fuel getting into the water, and so on and so forth. So I'm thinking that's how it may survive, if it's approved at town meeting. The third thing, and I'm going to bring this up, and this will come up with a couple of these bylaws, is the fine. I believe the fine was $300, and the lawyer said in a couple of his statements that, and it'll come up in the marijuana, public consumption of marijuana bylaw, that he's saying that you can't impose more than a $100 fine. Well, Chapter 40, Section 21D does give cities and towns the authority to charge up to $300 in fines on any bylaw. And that, it too, is in the acts and resolves, Mass Acts and Resolves. And I have a copy of that if anybody would like to see that as
He
well.
doesn't raise that objection to this one, by the way.
No, oh, yeah, that's right, but that
Not on the
will
way
come
out.
up in others.
Right,
but-
in the next one. Right.
Yeah, so I did, instead of backpedaling, I thought I'd bring it up in this one.
Yep.
So I guess unless you have any other questions, there was one other thing he noted, that enforcement is, and that was probably my mistake when I wrote this law, it's not by indictment, it's only by non-criminal violation, chapter 46.
So we have to strike anything that talks about criminal complaint or.
Criminal indictment, right, exactly.
He also makes and I see it's not in here, and I don't know if, again, it didn't make it to press time or not, but town council raises the differential between you enumerating motor vehicles and then going into all-terrain vehicles and snow vehicles and just calling them vehicles.
Right,
I personally, I think, from what I read at least, the exception he brings up is minor. But I just wanted to know if you pondered that and have addressed it by leaving it in here, or?
well, he corrected it. In the corrected version, he made it a vehicle, and I don't honestly see the difference. I mean, it's defined here. Motor vehicles are defined in Chapter 90, Section 1, and then in the second definition, all-terrain vehicles, snow vehicles are all defined in the definitions.
Okay.
So it just appeared a lot more clear to me than what, he had proposed. But that's fine if you wanted to leave it as vehicles. My intent was to make sure that, snowmobilers, four-wheelers, if they can use the lake, if they do it legally. In other words, they're doing it in compliance with Chapter 90B. That's all, and they should be.
I think the way it's written, I think having the definitions and having the specific sections talk about what's allowed and what not is clearer to me than to transfer it to the word vehicle. That's my opinion.
Like I said, I thought it was a minor point.
I think it's very clear what's allowed and what's not.
So let's talk about what I asked to begin with. So now let's talk about Article 38 and 39, and what is the intent of it? What is the intent of this article?
Of this article we're talking about.
Yes.
Well, the purpose and scope is, I guess you could say, is the intent of the article. It's protection of the safety of the public, protection of the wildlife, protection of, destruction of aquatic life, and so on and so forth, to protect the environment on Whalen Lake. And as I said in the past, there's been many times when cars have gone through the lake and you have an oil slick, and then you have a towing operation which further pollutes the lake and damages the, plant life and aquatic life in the lake. So that's what we're trying to prevent. And, safety of the public. We've had to pull people out of the water, and more than once. The car went through and, fortunately, I don't remember any fatalities that we were involved in, but I remember a couple instances where we actually had to pull people out of the water. So that's the intent of it. Keep the just motor vehicles, cars, not motor vehicles, let's say cars off the lake, and trucks.
Yeah, could you just, motor vehicle is defined by Chapter 90, and then I know it's 90B and some other things. What's the kind of the layman's cut on the, I assume ATVs are not motor vehicles by this definition?
Not by that definition, no.
How about boats?
Boats come under 90B as well. They're not by the Chapter 90 section.
Okay, so this is pretty much cars?
Cars and motorcycles.
Okay.
Motorcycles, I think, are a little bit different animal.
That's motor vehicle we're talking about.
Right,
Okay.
motor vehicle, yeah.
Okay.
So you're basically saying no motor vehicles on Lake Whalen,
Right,
but snowmobiles would be allowed, all-terrain vehicles would be allowed.
yes.
Unless posted. Unless posted that they can't.
Right.
And when do we decide when we're going to post it?
Well, I think it's just the law, and I saw that in every law written about great ponds, even state law. They just want, because there may be a time when they have to post it for whatever reason. Maybe there's a flock of geese laying eggs on the lake, we'll say for instance, and you want to post it temporarily. So it gives you the authority to do that. That doesn't mean it's permanent, but, could be.
If I remember the discussion when you changed the law 2 years ago, it was basically we didn't want to get in making the decision on whether the lake was safe
Right,
department.
exactly what we don't
That
wanna
we
do.
don't want to be in
Right.
that.
No,
you know,
and we
right.
can't, and
Right.
even in 90B, and some of the other laws pertaining to the use of snow machines, it says right in there, it has to be, I believe it's 4 inches of packed snow or 5 inches of ice, and it's up to the driver to determine that, not any of us.
Right.
We can't do
Right.
that.
Right.
So that too helps us, I think, in
Right.
terms of liability. We're not saying, oh yeah, you can go on there because the ice is frozen. It's their responsibility to determine whether the ice is thick enough.
Just a very minor technical note on Section 4A, when you define any motor vehicle and then you go on to define it as defined in Mass General Law, Chapter 90, Section 1, which is redundant since that's the definition in the definition section. So you
Right.
probably don't need that.
Okay.
But aside from that, I don't have any, and then of course the exclusion of any criminal complaints or criminal process. So again, bylaws are not subject to criminal processes.
Sometimes when I write these types of law,
No,
it
it's
might
fine.
sound redundant, but it's like you're trying to make it as clear as possible because
Well, sometimes doing that,
It
when
makes
you
it-
change it later
right.
on, it makes it unclear, because then you don't catch every change.
exactly.
Right,
That's
so
what happens.
that's the only reason I bring it up.
So in section 3B, it does state that no person shall operate a snow vehicle or all-terrain vehicle on frozen waters unless the minimum of 5 inches of solid ice cover. Does that technically then mean that that could be a violation if it's less than that you would be able to enforce it?
Yes,
Okay,
that's correct.
I just want to be clear on it.
And again, that's just for the safety of the driver, obviously. But again, that's kind of subjective as well, because we'd have to be able to measure the ice, but I think that's just more of a suggestion, a deterrent.
Well, if they go through, it wasn't 5 inches.
Definitely further that.
Well, they have a really heavy vehicle.
And, I'd like to point out, too, that there is actually, I have a copy of it right here. I'll read it to you, that regulations of certain activities on Shirley Reservoir. And in that bylaw, it says that the following words that used in this bylaw, unless a different meaning is required by context or specifically prescribed, shall have the following meanings. Vehicles shall include passenger motor vehicles and trucks, both registered and unregistered. Then it goes on to say that I'm sorry, well, I guess the point I'm trying to make is it doesn't include snowmobiles, is what I'm trying to get at. So there's a bylaw that was written years ago that's specifically for cars and trucks. So basically, I'm trying to do the same thing here, I guess.
So I guess, good. I was just going to say, so based on that, should we, at next town meeting, do another parallel article for Shirley Reservoir to parallel this one?
I was going to suggest that. We
Okay.
probably should do that in the interest of cleaning up some of the bylaws.
I do have one question. It's specific to Section 5, which is the public access section
Yep.
that talks about written permission. There is a Snowmobile Association of Massachusetts, and as you know, there's a local snowmobile club, of which I'm a member, which has insurance and is a member of, in good standing of the Snowmobile Association of Massachusetts. Obviously, we have more than one member. In the past, we have a process by which if we ride over land, and I mean we as the club, we
Right.
get written permission from the landowner to the club. And that permission extends to every member of the club.
Right.
So I am assuming, and I just want to verify my assumption, that when it says, or by written permission by the landowner, if the landowner were to grant permission to the snowmobile club or to the Snowmobile Association of Massachusetts,
Right.
and though that the individual who was operating the vehicle was a member of that organization in good standing, that permission would satisfy.
It would be, yeah, it'd be
Okay.
blanket permission is permission, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another similar on the same item is just, written permission of the landowner. If if I'm a landowner and I'm on the lake and I just go out my backyard and
Oh,
go,
yeah.
I don't need anything written with me or anything.
No.
I mean, that's kind of silly, but
No, that's
Write yourself a note.
shoreline.
Yeah.
Write
Actually,
yourself a
that-
letter.
Yeah, well, actually, that was one of my questions, is reading the first draft, because that written permission wasn't in. It just said, "No snow vehicle or all-terrain vehicle shall enter upon Whalum Lake except by public access." And the question that I had was, if I live on Whalum Lake and I have a snowmobile,
Right.
I want to be able just to access.
Right, and that
so-
was one of the comments,
Yeah.
or one of the issues that came up, and again,
Thank you.
Any other further questions about this article? I would entertain a motion on this article.
I would make a motion to recommend approval.
Do I have a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay, you're 1 for 1. Article 40 has to do with a bylaw that restricts the public consumption of marijuana or tetrahydrocannabinol.
okay. My first comment about this article is, first of all, this is about smoking marijuana in public. Public consumption of, it's not public consumption, this is smoking. In other words, there are going to be cancer patients who in public may have to somehow, ingest or whatever marijuana, but that form is different. They're not, it's highly unlikely that some cancer patient is going to be smoking marijuana in public. They're going to take it in a pill form or some other edible form. So that's all this law really addresses. We don't want people sparking one up down at Marshall Park while you're sitting there watching your kid's baseball game. And that's what could happen without this law. So it doesn't affect cancer patients, except that they can't smoke it in public. But it's highly unlikely that'll never happen, because that's not how they do it, as a rule. I mean, there are cases where they do. And chances are, they're not going to smoke in public anyway. If you're sick or if you're a patient, you're not going to be out in public smoking marijuana. This is just to stop those situations. You're at some school function and somebody sparks up a marijuana cigarette. You don't want that going on in public. The other thing about this law is the lawyer said that the EOPS version of this that was handed out to, and let me just read that. It was available, the article was available through the Executive Office of Public Safety, and it was adopted and approved. And it says that ours appears to differ on one material respect, and it contains a restriction on smoking marijuana. Well, if this is theirs, this is their article, this is much more restrictive, because this would stop cancer patients from taking their medicine in public if they had to. This one, the one I wrote, doesn't. It only stops you from smoking. Now, you got to look at it this way. We don't allow people to smoke cigarettes in restaurants anymore, right? Would you really want somebody to smoke marijuana in a restaurant now or in a public place? I mean, I don't think so, but, that's up to the public to decide. But this law that he's referring to, that the EOPS put out, is about the consumption. And it says, and I'll read the first line, it says, "No person shall smoke, ingest, or otherwise use or consume marijuana or tetrahydrocannabinol while in or upon any street, sidewalk, public way, footway, passageway, stairs, bridge, and so on." The one we have doesn't say that. It just says we don't want them smoking it in public. So, anyways, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it.
I think the part that the town council did say that it differs in that you are restricting smoking marijuana for even the qualifying patient.
Right.
And I believe that there are patients that smoke.
They do. Oh, I'm not denying that.
So-
But would they smoke in public?
People smoke cigarettes in public. So I'm talking about places where it's legal to smoke cigarettes. That's where I would have a problem with prohibiting somebody who's got a valid medical certification.
Well, the only problem with that is you're talking about a lot of people right now. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of cards out there, medical marijuana cards, that maybe shouldn't be out there. So, you know, if somebody who's got cancer, fully respect and sympathize with them, but that's not going to be the case, I guarantee you. And that's why we need to restrict everybody from smoking in public. Legitimate cancer patient, I would be surprised if they're out in the public somewhere smoking marijuana.
It's more than cancer, there's other legitimate reasons. And so
glaucoma,
I would say if there's an issue with the too many people getting those cards, then there needs to be a way of dealing with that, but not prohibiting a patient with a valid disease from taking the marijuana the way that they have been prescribed to do. I'm fine with the article, but I've got a problem with that clause.
And the likelihood that it might be challenged is an issue, according to the lawyer.
Well,
That portion,
Right.
not the whole bylaw.
my attitude about that is, and being a lawyer, I'm sure you probably would agree with me, I mean, everything's subject to challenge. So, as I said, this is, the one that they recommended was a lot more conservative than what we're proposing here. You know, I can't see, and I hope the general public agrees with me, I cannot understand why somebody, even somebody who is prescribed marijuana has to smoke it in public. I don't understand why that has to happen. And certainly, like I said, if I'm down to one of the local baseball parks watching my kid play baseball and somebody lights up a joint, I'm not going to be too happy. But, you know, it's like I said, I suppose it's up to you and the public to decide. I'm just trying to make the quality of life a little better in town.
Now, you said the other statute that you were using as an example is more
prohibitive.
restrictive? Is
Yeah.
that the state?
This is what the Executive Office of Public Safety issued to the cities and towns as a recommendation.
And in what ways is yours more lenient?
Ours, or the one I'm proposing, is smoking of marijuana. This is consuming in any way, shape, or form. Smoking, eating, chewing, or whatever. So this one's much more prohibitive. You know,
Also
if you had
harder to enforce. It's hard to know what's in your brownie.
Well, you know, right, well, I mean, under our bylaw, if some cancer patient did put it in the form of brownies, that's perfectly fine. If somebody's eating a brownie at, you know, the local park or whatever, hey, so be it. But I just, you know, personally, I wouldn't want to inhale the smoke.
So that one's more restrictive because of its consumption.
Right,
And yours just says smoking.
right, exactly.
As a former smoker, I think that the fact that you can smoke in public anywhere is remarkable, and it's disappearing quickly. I don't know that anybody would feel particularly persecuted if they had to smoke in private, if they choose to consume through smoking.
Personally, that is my feeling as well. I don't think it's overly restrictive, and certainly this bylaw is lenient, not lenient, but it is tolerant of any other mechanism. And just as smoking creates secondhand smoke that affects people, obviously the effects of smoke of marijuana or any of its forms, if you're smoking it, affects other people. You know, so I don't think it is an overburden to put on somebody to say, if that is the mechanism that you choose to consume marijuana, you can do it, you know, in your home or someplace else,
Yeah.
other than in these areas that are defined. So I'm perfectly fine with it.
I would agree, and I think that, there is, I would be concerned about the secondhand smoke. And in the example that you talk about, if somebody were to light up, next to my grandchildren, I wouldn't be good with that. Right. So, so I actually agree with the bylaw. A question that I have, when you talk about smoking, what about and I don't know whether this is even possible, but those e-cigarette things or the vaporizer, would this bylaw extend to those as well?
It contains marijuana.
If it did, yeah.
Okay.
If it was,
if it's smoking, regardless of whether it's handheld or whether it's an electronic device that's smoking.
Right. It would apply just as if they went down to the baseball game with a bong or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It would.
It actually may not, because they're talking about changing the regulations and the rules regarding e-cigarettes, and because they don't get treated like smoking. So I'm not sure that if somebody got an e-cigarette and was able to do this instead of tobacco, because what they'd be doing is you don't smoke tobacco, you inhale nicotine with the e-cigarette. So what it would be is that it actually would fall, you wouldn't be smoking marijuana, you would be doing an e-cig through that process. Right. So I don't believe it would cover that, because I don't think it qualifies as smoking. This is all going to be moot in a couple of years when the Massachusetts votes to legalize marijuana anyway, so.
Well, yeah, I know that question did come up, but it may not be. I mean, cigarettes are legal, but you can't smoke in public.
Right.
Well, you can on public parks, and that's what the Board of Health in Westminster had major issues, including a recall effort, because they attempted to stop smoking in all public areas. And so right now you can smoke at Marshall Park, you can smoke at other parts. So we can talk about not wanting to be near secondhand smoke, but it's legal to smoke, except for in public buildings or at the entrances to public buildings. But public areas, streets and everything are currently public smoking areas.
But I'm
not a smoker. I don't like the smoke.
Yeah.
I understand the intent of this. My problem is not the smoke. It's the person who has a legitimate medical ability, and they choose that form of medicine that we're telling them they can't do it in public. So I support the article, just not that sentence.
Okay, speaking to the legalization of marijuana, you're right. Let me rephrase what I said. Smoking is not allowed in restaurants. It's not allowed on school property. I'm hoping that if they do legalize it, that some of that aspects of this bylaw may survive, may have to be rewritten to survive those instances, because would you really, you can't allow that. Would you want somebody in a restaurant smoking
I don't think you can, that smoking marijuana is the same thing as smoking nicotine. Tobacco, it's still prohibited. They don't say smoking cigarettes. I believe that smoking is not allowed. It doesn't care what it is.
So it's broad, in other words,
I believe that's the case. I would need to look at it, but I believe the word is smoking, not smoking tobacco.
Right.
Okay.
Any other questions for the chief?
I actually do have a question, and I guess this goes back to the other article as well, and that is the $300 fine.
Mm-hmm.
Does the officer have the ability, rather than immediately imposing the fine, just as with a speeding violation, to issue a warning before they invoke the fine?
Not a written warning. They can issue, obviously, at the discretion to issue a verbal warning.
Okay.
But the 21D doesn't give them the option of a written warning.
Okay, because my concern is, if somebody's out on the lake or out at a game and they're not aware of this bylaw, and let's face it, not everyone is aware of every bylaw.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope that the officer would extend the courtesy of, this is the bylaw, and, before they invoke a $300 fine, because that's a pretty steep fine.
Right, and don't forget, all right, we rely heavily on the discretion of the officers in those instances.
Right.
And, I can speak for the people who work for me now, that they use a great deal of discretion in those cases. However, there's also the hearing remedy here that's included in Chapter 40, Section 21D. So if they did feel, and I know it'd be a hassle at that point, they've already gotten fined, now they got to go, for a hearing. However, there is a remedy for it. But yeah, I would hope, just like with traffic tickets, that they use great discretion. And I suggest the $300 fine too, just so you understand that. Some of these laws were written quite a few years ago when $100 was a huge amount of money. Well, today that's different. So that's why I suggest that we stay with the max, and that's why they gave us that authority to do that over the years, to increase the fine up to that amount, because, economy, economics and so on and so forth.
Is there a fine for smoking cigarettes in a non-designated area?
Geez, that's a good question. I don't even know, honestly. I don't know.
Because I think the offense that we're looking at is, again, you're not using this as a drug offense. It should be the same for that.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be more.
Although it actually prohibited ingestion of marijuana in public for everybody, except for the people that have a medical. So this is not just an anti-smoking marijuana.
Right.
This is an anti-consumption bylaw.
Right, I'm sorry, I'm glad you brought that up. It is. It's anti-consumption, except for people
Right.
who are,
Medical
have
conditions.
a medical marijuana card.
So somebody who
sorry
doesn't
about that.
have medical marijuana who eats the brownie that's laced will be subject to this fine. So this is a drug offense. And so the question I have is that the town council says that the statute 94C 32L says the limit is $100. I know you're talking about town bylaws possibly being 300. I think we need to have clarification on this before town meeting.
Yeah, I saw that. 32L, though, it doesn't, you're talking about two different laws here.
Right.
32L is a $100 fine for a violation of that statute, and this doesn't, I'm lost for the word I want to use, but it doesn't circumvent that at all, or,
Conflict with is what you're saying. I think that's where the town council,
Yeah, what does 32L say? What is it concerned with?
32L is possession of marijuana under an ounce is a non-criminal violation.
Okay, but in our bylaw, you're not fining them for
possession.
having it. You're fining them for breaking the bylaw and consuming it.
Smoking it, right. Technically,
Consuming it.
consuming it.
Consuming it without a license,
Consuming it or smoking.
without a
right.
card, or smoking it in general.
Right, right.
So I
Consuming
don't,
it-
so I think the distinction is clear.
Yeah.
but part of what town council is saying is that the intent of the statute is to decriminalize the consumption of marijuana, and if you somehow come up with another way to effectively criminalize it at a higher rate, he's saying that those would conflict even though they're two different laws.
Now, again, not consumption, you use the word consumption. The legislature wanted to decriminalize possession. They're not getting fined under this bylaw for having it. You can have it in your pocket and not get charged for it if you have any marijuana product. You're getting fined for consuming it without a card or smoking it if you're anybody.
I understand that, but the word out on the street and the legal community is that, is this a way to get around the law that's decriminalized marijuana at $100? So coming up with another law may conflict with this law,
Okay.
however it is. So that's why I want town council to give us some clarity on that.
And I think what town council is pointing out, the enforcement by criminal complaint, and he's saying that it is not, that may not be applicable because 32L decriminalizes possession of marijuana.
No, and he's right.
No.
He's right. That was my
Right,
mistake.
right. So you're going to
It's not
take
because of 32L. You can't, in a bylaw, generate criminal
criminal complaint,
indictments
exactly.
from a bylaw.
Exactly. So
That's
the
what
plan
he's
is
saying.
to strike that language when you
Yes.
present
Well, I
the
think it's out of
articles?
here
He already did, yeah.
It says
Yeah, so
enforce
not
through-
in here.
It says through
There's no
criminal.
indictment.
Okay.
It just says criminal complaint of fines. I'm assuming that's the proper term, although, again, if you break a bylaw, I'm not sure, is that criminal? Criminal seems to be a little more serious, but
Yeah, and that's the other part of the issue with the conflict of the law, is to effectively get a local bylaw that criminalizes the use of marijuana.
Right.
So-
But this bylaw doesn't contravene 94C Section
Right.
32L, 1L?
Well, that's where we need to have town council, because I believe that it may. I personally understand that you're saying that that's possession and this is use, but I believe that there may be some additional legal implications on that.
Okay.
any further discussion on this? Or does anybody want to make a motion on this article?
I would recommend that we wait till town meeting to find out from town council, because there may be some wording changing. Separate from my own concern, but just the other criminal component.
Is that the will of the board?
I'm fine with that.
I mean, I guess the warrant's gone out, right? So, I mean, us making a recommendation at town meeting or making one tonight doesn't necessarily, I mean, I'm in favor of the bylaw. I agree that there may be changes that need to be made, you know, from a legal standpoint, and we should check with town council. But I actually support the concept and the reasoning behind why to have this bylaw.
As do I.
So I guess the question is whether or not we want to make a recommendation tonight, or whether we want to wait till town meeting.
Okay, Mr. Ebersol made a motion.
No, I actually made a recommendation.
Make a recommendation. Okay, so I will accept a motion. If anybody wants to move anything.
I'm willing to accept Mr. Ebersol's recommendation.
Yeah, so we'll just wait till town meeting.
Okay, so we're waiting till town meeting.
Sure. Pawn shops?
Pawn shops.
Pawn shops.
The
On
degree of
brokers.
difficulty keeps going up here.
Pawn brokers, I guess.
Pawnbrokers.
Yes, town council had a lot of comments on this.
Were you able to incorporate a lot of the town council's comments? I mean, I didn't do a one-for-one check on this one because it isn't
Into the law?
into the
bylaw.
final version.
Actually, they did it for me.
Okay.
I mean, there was a couple of questions they had. I mean, let me go in, let me look at this. The way I understand it, or the way, and this isn't clear. Actually, I got a call into the lawyer who wrote this. He hasn't called me back yet, but the way I was led to understand this law is that, which all you're doing is accepting Chapter 140, Chapter 140, the sections that pertain to pawnbrokers. And it says right in 140 under Section 70 that the selectmen of any town, if ordinance and bylaws therefore have been adopted in such city and town, may license suitable persons to carry on the business of pawnbrokers in such city and town. Subject to Section 200 and 200 to 205 inclusive, and may revoke such licenses at the pleasure. So my understanding is all you're doing is accepting that law, and by doing that, it allows you to license pawnbrokers.
Okay, so take a step back first. Purpose and scope. You're introducing this because there's a deficiency in our bylaws for some reason.
We have no control over people who sell gold and metal and, silver, and who take in electronics and so on and so forth. We have no control at all over them. So they can buy and sell stolen property, and we really don't have a lot of control over that, except by what's allowed by state statute. We can't make them report to us. Most pawnbrokers report to the police through a database today. One of them is done through this organization called NESPN, New England State Police organization. And we're able daily to access that, to make sure that some of those items aren't items we already know are stolen property. And if they are, we can recover them that way. We have no ability to do that with the people who sell those sorts of things in Lunenburg.
Okay.
All
right, so that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Right.
So the state law doesn't allow you to do that?
It allows us, there's some things we can do. We can go in and look at the books, and there's a section, in fact, he makes a comment about it, how they're supposed to allow you to look at their record books to see what they've sold or bought or whatever. But they're not licensed. So in other words, if they, and we have been able to confiscate stolen goods from them. But if they continue to do it, and we know that they're just doing it purposely, we have no control over that. We can't stop them from doing business. Whereas if you license them, you can impose fines, or you can revoke their license to do business, and it keeps them honest. Then they're not going to buy all the stolen goods. And I'll tell you, that's a big problem today, because people break into houses all the time, and that's what they steal, is gold and silver, and they'll steal the copper pipes out of your house and sell them to metal, dealers in metal, and steal electronics and go up to, whoever buys and sells electronics, and I'm not going to name names because some people are innocent in that case, but this is a problem. So we have no control over that.
So when you license them, you can regulate them?
You can regulate them, right, and I can help you to do that. And there was a comment about that, too, where it said there was an issue that came up, and it may just be a change in words, but it sounds like I'm the one deciding who gets, or who's going to be punished by you. When in fact, I think when I read that paragraph, and I don't want to bounce around too much, but when I read that, it sounds like if I receive a complaint that, there's been some violation of their license, it's up to me to bring it to you. That's the way I read it. Not, it's up to me whether I will bring it to you. I have to, just like a liquor law violation. When we have a liquor law violation, we write out a report and we hand it to you. That's the way I read this pawnbroker's law, same thing. It works the same way. But there was a question about how come, let me find it, basically why wasn't there a fine structure in the first section? Because it looks like two bylaws, when in fact it may be. I mean, it sounds like he wants us to break it out and make it two bylaws. Buys and sells of goods and electronics, and second one is sale and exchange or purchase of metals. That's Article 2. Article 1, as I said, the way I understood it is all we're doing is accepting the state law, and the state law provides for the penalties. And it gives you the authority to regulate them through permitting. That's the way I understand it. If that's a mistake, then we can correct it.
But it does say that it's not identical to the state law.
It looks like a lot of the comments were incorporated, but not necessarily all of them.
Right.
So I think I'm fine with this as a concept, recognizing that this is another tool for the police department to deal with stolen goods. And that I just ask that town council work with the police chief, as he's already been working, to make any of his recommendations, because most of the recommendations look to be, how do we make it consistent with state law? It's not that you don't adopt this bylaw. Do we have any pawnbrokers in town that are official pawnbrokers?
No, but we do have people who sell gold and silver and so forth, and electronics.
I'd like to understand what's been incorporated and what hasn't, and I'm trying to go back and forth.
Well, let's just go in order then. So, Article 1. So the first thing town council says is that this actually addresses two separate items, or licensing of two separate businesses, one of pawnbrokers, one of buyer and sellers of goods and electronics. And both of them are regulated by state law under General Law, Chapter 140. Specifically, subsection 70 for pawnbrokers and subsection 54 for dealers in or keepers of shops for the purchase of, sale, or barter of junk, old metals, or secondhand articles. So my first question on this is, how much does this bylaw mimic what the state law, so I haven't read the state law, is it outlined exactly in these kind of subsections or not?
Well, this is why I made a phone call, because I'm not too sure myself. To me, it looks pretty much the same, and I don't know I think what he's referring to is establishing, like in the second paragraph, it says about establishing a licensing period and so on and so forth.
Right.
I might have missed that, and I wanted to confer with him to find out what it is that he found that I didn't see. And I apologize, I just haven't called back. I only called him yesterday.
I understand. No, when I read this, the first thing I thought is like, he's saying that most of this is covered under those general laws.
Right.
And that we have certain distinctions and certain differences. So I thought, well, why don't we say we accept those laws? Well, I don't think they're acceptable. We have to, right, because they're not something we adopt.
Right.
But we're setting up pawnbrokers or sellers of goods and metals and secondhand articles per general, per state statute, and cite that, and then just say with the modifications of, and then just cite our modifications.
Right. What we've done, I mean, that's what we started to do with the policies and procedures, is we referred to the state law, and then if we had provisions that were more stringent than the state law, we articulated what those were. And I guess that's my question, is what are the specifics that what are the additional requirements we're placing beyond the state law?
Right. And I don't even think that's the case here, because I couldn't really find anything different about it, but that's why I wanted to pick his brain. I mean, he's an expert at it. I'm just a police
So
chief.
if the state law exists, I guess my question would be, why do we need the bylaw?
Because what he said when he first talked about it, in a community that adopts a bylaw, the following things will be in effect. So just the wording of the statute says this won't go into effect until you have a bylaw.
Oh, okay.
So the bylaw may be that we just give ourselves the right to license them, the right to have fines and other stuff like that, and then we refer to all other sections there. So
Right.
I agree that this could possibly be made much smaller.
Exactly.
I mean, I have to say, I was surprised, because this was not brought, certainly, I don't know about other members of the board, it certainly wasn't brought to my attention. That's something that was, 8 pages. I'm looking at this, I'm like, really? All this for pawnbrokers and sellers of, I would imagine that selling firearms probably doesn't have, in our bylaws, have a section like this.
Right.
People are going to sell all electronics.
Yeah.
So it seems to be, to me, and again, I don't mean this in any critical way, it just seems to me excessive for what we are trying to do. Like, the only thing that's close to being like this is our alcoholic license, bylaw.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I know that is of this length and this breadth.
This is this might clarify too, this is an 1855 act, and these are all, that gives you the authority basically to license people under that once you accept it. So, it's always interesting to read the old, but that's where it started.
I mean, I think the other thing is that if the danger of doing anything that just repeats the general law is that every time they change the general law, then we have to change the bylaws.
Right.
So that's the other reason why we try not to have.
Right.
So I don't have, on its face, I don't have any problem with what we're trying to do. I do have lots of flags, as our town council has raised, but even some of my own, about, okay, is this the minimalistic, the most minimalistic way for us to do this and get what we want?
Right.
Because like Mr. Ebersol said, if we mimic this on the state law and then they change state law or make changes, then we have to go back and make sure it's on us to make the changes.
And note the
Instead of
amendments.
just saying, hey, listen, we're going to follow, for the purposes of establishing pawnbrokers, we're going to follow Mass General Law, Chapter, 140, Section 70, with the following modifications, and then we can define time and licensing and whatever those things that make it different. And I guess what we need to do is probably work that with town council and see how best to do that in the least amount of pages.
I think all you have to do is add that statement, and correct me if I'm wrong, as amended, once you say that you're gonna, right? Am I right, Bob? As amended?
Not necessarily.
Not if you've got the
Not if you
actual,
enumerate everything else.
if you've got the actual language. What it says is that, subject to 140, section such and such,
Right.
if you say that as amended, you're okay. But if you say all the language that's in there, then you've now got a bylaw that now conflicts with the state law.
Yeah.
So,
All right. So, and this is a lengthy, this is a lot of work, and
No,
I had to.
right.
So you're right, it may be a work in progress, but.
And that's what I'm thinking. I'm
Yeah.
thinking, and I'm just tossing the idea out there, that this may be something we rework,
Right.
and maybe it doesn't happen at this town meeting. That's all I'm saying. I don't
Yeah, and I'm
want
not-
to shock anybody by
Oh,
saying.
I'm not shocked at all. As a matter of fact, that was my next question, I guess, is, obviously done a lot of work to get to this point, and I realize it's not the end of the road. So if, you know, if they're not ready by May, then obviously it'll have to wait till, I assume, till October or whenever the next town meeting.
Bylaws can be passed in special town meetings, correct?
Special. Sure.
Okay,
Oh, like a fall special town meeting,
Right.
yes.
right.
I was thinking special within the annual.
No, but I mean, we don't have to wait, it's not like he gets one shot a year at doing this. We
Right.
can- Okay, so that might be what happens, just so we get it the tightest it can be.
Yeah, all right. And who knows, by then, maybe they'll legalize marijuana.
I'm not saying that for the other ones, the other ones I'm fine with.
So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues that I need to clarify as well, and I'm
Okay.
sorry I didn't have that information, but
So I think, am I correct in saying that our assumption is we want to wait and have the chief work with town council and see where we can get it?
Yes.
Okay.
okay.
Okay. Article 42.
Can I just get that back? I can make a copy
Yes.
for you.
Like when we went back to 1895.
It's probably still a valid law.
Yeah, exactly. And then in 1895, Lieutenant, you've been waiting so patiently.
I have, thank you.
Showtime.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The article that we've submitted is a article restricting the residency and establishing some safe zones in the town of Lunenburg with regards to registered sex offenders. It's the intent of this to protect the town's interest in the safety and welfare of the citizens by creating these areas where children and elderly regularly congregate in large numbers or in numbers, where certain sex offenders are prohibited from loitering and establishing residence. The two main components, the first one being the residential restriction, lists certain areas in town where if a sex offender was already classified as a level 2 or level 3 in the state, moved into town, would restrict them from moving close to schools, parks, playgrounds, beaches, and a list of other places like the senior center, licensed daycare facilities. Let me back up for a second. The state of Massachusetts classifies convicted sex offenders in 3 classifications. A level 3 is a person that's most likely to reoffend, a 2 a little bit less likely, and number 1 is the least likely. So this is only applying to the level 2 and the level 3. The number in our town fluctuates due to people moving in and out of town. We currently have 26 registered sex offenders in town.
Level 2 and 3?
Total, including ones. We have, there's 8 level 1s, 13 level 2, and 5 level 3 in Lunenburg right
So
now.
how come only certain ones are posted? in front of this
By
building?
statute, the more serious ones by statute. Level 3s, we're required to actually post those
Okay.
by a statute.
And how many of those do we have?
5.
Because I only saw 4 downstairs.
Well, one is in, lack of a better term, is being reviewed.
Okay.
They challenged it. And it was actually at that classification for many, many years, and it's currently under challenge, legal challenge as the classification.
Gotcha.
2s, people can come into the police station with a request and get the information, and they're signing a waiver saying that they can't do something illicit with that information. Level 1s were prohibited from giving out, and you won't find that information on the state website either, because the statute doesn't allow it. So back to the residential restriction, it is placing a restriction where someone is not allowed to establish a residence within 1,000 feet of those areas that I was listing, the schools and that whole list of protected areas. There's some exceptions to the law for someone who's already, maybe the residence is already established, or if in the future one of these type of facilities was newly built, a new school is built, someone's already has a residence, there would be an exception to that law. The second component is the safety zone, and this would prohibit a level 2 or level 3 offender from entering schools or daycare centers without permission from the people that run those facilities. There was also the component of the safety zone where a person of one of those classifications isn't allowed to loiter or be within 500 feet of all the same protected areas I listed in the residential section. Both components have a civil fine structure as well as a criminal. They could be charged criminally in court or could be fined criminally from the town. Excuse me, civilly from the town.
I was going to say, because criminally, again, this is.
Right, no, I know,
bylaw.
that's the way usually the bylaw is written up, but we'd be enforcing the civil aspect of it. One of the requirements, we would be required to provide a map, a town map that would delineate all the protected zones.
The town council had a lot of concerns regarding this bylaw, and have you talked with town council since their letter?
No, if not. Matter of fact, that's relatively new to me, and I can't even say I can address all those intelligently.
You know, there's a number of concerns that council that suggested and, you know, even questioning, you know, if this bylaw were to be challenged, that that the prevailing party may be entitled to an award of attorney's fees against the town. The bylaw may be preempted by state law. You know, he talks about that the if it has the practical event of eliminating residency anywhere within the town limits or preventing any sex offender from freely traveling within the town would likely be deemed overly broad and therefore unconstitutional. You know, there's a lot of concerns here. So I think before we act on this, we really need to work with town council.
Understood.
I agree.
The comment from the town council, and we just got those recently, and I have not spoken with town council. The chief has made inroads there. The physical makeup of our town and the places that we're interested in protecting, I don't think would rise to that particular problem. We're a rural enough town where we shouldn't interfere too much. I think that could be applied to a more dense populated area where people wouldn't be able to live anywhere, essentially. But I understand council's concern.
They also brought up lots of definitional problems. Part of them are, part of the problems that I saw right away were ones that he brought up, or the town council brought up, which were the fact of the transience of the maps. You talk about camp bus stops, school bus stops. Well, these things change annually.
So you'd have to
So
provide new
you'd have to
maps.
provide a renewed map.
Updated every
And then the
4
fact that the map is shifting makes it problematic for somebody, you know, who may want to move into one of those locations.
Sure.
So a pending sale, if somebody's, just take the worst case, somebody's in a purchase and sale agreement, and then the new bus map comes out, and all of a sudden that house that they're under agreement with is now, they can't finalize the sale.
I believe, and I could be mistaken, but I believe that aspect of, it doesn't apply to residency, that's for the loitering. Yeah, I did see his comment,
Okay.
but the residentially, I can't speak tonight, resident part of it.
The residence
living-
requirement, yeah.
Thank you. It doesn't apply to the bus stops, it's more for that's for the loitering aspect of it.
Okay, well then, they
Right.
had a problem with loitering.
He did-
Because loitering, they're really, I mean, every time, at least in his comments, in their comments, town council said that really loitering is kind of not a real, it's not a real crime.
Right.
You can't prevent people from
Hanging out.
being somewhere,
Right.
unless they're engaging in unlawful activity. Like, just the fact that you're standing on a street corner doesn't make something illegal.
Right, what he says is it poses a constitutional challenge.
Right.
An individual may challenge the limitations of their ability to travel to or entertain enter certain locations as specified, on grounds that it unjustifiably restricts his or her right to move freely or to engage in family relations. And he was actually recommending that that whole section be stricken.
Right.
There's also a comment in there about some pending cases that would probably be prudent to see how those.
Right, well, there's two major ones,
Right.
right? So there's one,
Right.
Doe versus, I don't think we need to go into it, but it's
Right, no, I-
five
Versus
registered
police
sex offenders
commissioner,
versus the town of
City of
Lynn.
Lynn.
And there's Doe versus
Police
the police
commissioner.
commissioner of Boston. That had to do with somebody being in I think an elderly facility or something like that. But, I mean, I understand why people want to adopt these. But I'd also say that I have fundamental problems with instituting these kind of restrictions. First of all, I think the first thing I think it does, and town council mentions this, and again, this is something I thought of, is that, the purpose of the sex offense registry is that you really want to promote people registering. If you make, and again, this may not apply to Lunenburg, but if enough places in the Commonwealth adopt them, so it becomes so restrictive, you actually almost force people to not want to register. And I think that would be probably worse in a lot of regards for policing. I mean, you really want to know where they are, and sure, it's illegal to not register, but, if you make it, if there's a balance, if there's somebody that somebody has to weigh against, you could certainly promote that. The second thing is, the state had the opportunity. I was surprised that the state didn't have these kind of restrictions. But I also have to believe that they probably entertained those restrictions. And there were probably reasons in that debate that precluded them from doing it. Because you could, in a town that is a small footprint, have so many instances of these 1,000-foot radiuses that you could basically wipe out the whole residency requirement for the whole town. And obviously, I don't care what anybody's beliefs are, that the Supreme Judicial Court's not going to uphold that. You can't stop people from being in town. So my last problem with it is, if the people, I take full knowledge of how dangerous people are. And when they instituted this, I'm like, if people are this dangerous and the rate of recidivism is so high, I have a problem with them being out anyway. Now, I don't think we can address this in a bylaw, but I don't think this is, I think there's something fundamentally wrong by towns or cities having to apply these kind of stringent restrictions. Because if people are that dangerous, why are they out?
We often ask the same question.
Right, right. And I understand that. I realize it in many ways it's a rhetorical question. I wish it would be taken up at other levels. We seem in this country to have no problem imprisoning lots of other people for long periods of time. Why somebody who's deemed to be dangerous, and some of them I know are 80% repeat offenders, so why is this onus put on the town anyway, or a city in the Commonwealth? I just don't think this is the answer, personally. I think if it creates a false sense of security, and I know in one of your beginning chapters it says that you can't be 100% safe, but, for the amount of people who are going to read every single line of these, aside from people who go to town meeting and this board and in your department, that's not going to mean very much. They're going to think, oh, well, how did this happen? So, and I think it's going to be up to a lot of legal challenges. So even if every one of these was addressed, I think it's still up to just the fact that you're restricting people beyond what the state has said to make it more stringent. I think that offers a host of problems. And I don't want this to be taken, for anybody listening, that I'm in any way defending sex offenders. It's just that there are things that are basic principles that I think that the laws are based on. And these violate lots of those that I think town council enumerated.
Yeah, I understand the reasoning behind why to adopt such a regulation, and it is for a sense of security, and I agree that the laws should be more stringent. I don't think individuals that have certainly repeat offenders should not be out, and I think this bylaw attempts to establish those safety zones, but given the comments that town council talks about and the the potential legal ramifications, I have serious concerns about adopting this bylaw.
The other practical part, and this is a national issue, is how this gets enforced against somebody who's not working. Because fining people that don't have money is not, do we start putting people in jail because they become debtors because they don't have the money to do this? So it's a bigger discussion that I'm not asking you to solve, but I think based on this discussion so far, excuse me, that this would be similar to the other article that needs more work and that may be more appropriate for a later town meeting, depending on the amount of work that could be done.
Well, I'd like to discuss this more, and as I said, I did have a call into the attorney, and haven't had an opportunity to even discuss these issues with him. And I'd like to discuss this bylaw as well, and it brought to my attention anyway.
Sure.
I mean, I read all of his notes, and I understand I understand the challenges with this bylaw, but I would like to have the opportunity to at least get his opinions. I mean, have an opportunity to discuss his opinions regarding this particular bylaw, because I feel there's some merit to it, and at any rate, if we can just defer this to maybe a later time or something to give us some opportunity. I mean, we never have obviously we don't have council services available to us except town council, and I know that's expensive, so I don't use it as
No, I think, first of all, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think if there's anything that, the pawnbroker one, I think can wait. But this one, if you want to approach town council and try to work on it before then and come before this board before town meeting, I'm more than happy to have you, obviously. I know it's an important issue. I know it's an important issue for people in town. I mean, a constituent reached out to our state representative, Dina Talley, who brought this to my attention, I spoke with the town manager. I know you, and she said you were working on one already anyway.
right.
So it's important to people in the town. I'm here offering my own opinion, but I want people to have a chance to discuss it.
Oh yeah, and I absolutely understand, your reasoning. I know all the challenges. I mean, I've read that. I knew that it was going to be challenged anyway by the attorneys. I mean, I can't imagine it wouldn't be. There are constitutional issues, obviously. So, I mean, even if we had all summer to work on it, maybe we can, revisit this in the fall or sometime after that if need be. But, maybe if I can, same with the pawnbroker thing, if I can have the summer maybe to work on that and try to refine it a little bit. And this one here, as you said, I knew that yeah.
I think even if everything is addressed, it's going to be a hot button issue for people one way or the other.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think it's one of those.
We expected that.
Right.
We expected that.
It would be helpful to me at a later point is to get a proposed map, not an official one, but,
Right.
Where is it doing? And then actually looking at the assessor's map as a result of this, what houses would actually be affected? Because in reality, in cities and towns, there's homeless shelters, there's, halfway houses and other things like that, which we don't have in this town, and that's one of the things that you're trying to propose on that. So this may be a valuable tool if some of those properties come in for the appropriate siting of those. So the map would help see what really is there and what's not there.
Right, and that brings up another question too, and I posed this to the town manager yesterday. So we didn't bother trying to have a map made first because I thought it was putting the cart before the horse. But town manager suggested that we do something. So we went to the assessor's office, and they did give me some examples of what a map would look like, how it would look to you anyway. And she suggested down in the assessor's office to contact a map maker that they use that could probably do that for us. But I guess getting to my question is, do we have funds for that? I mean, it's gonna cost money, and obviously, we probably should do it before we even try to propose this.
Well, if at any point you're going to put this on it's already on the warrant, right? If you're going to do it, it needs a map.
Right,
So by de facto, the answer is, we would need to do it anyway.
so essentially, we're studying this, so we're gonna need money to study it, because it's gonna cost us money to have a map made up, is what I'm getting at. And is
But
there
it would be,
fund-
it would be good to look at the lawyer's recommendations that, of avoiding the establishment of a housing restriction that would have the practical effect of forbidding a registered sex offender from residing anywhere within the town limits. You have to sort of clean it up to make sure there are some places they could live, and you can probably do that before you go to the map maker, right?
Right.
Just think about the areas around schools and the churches, the most prominent areas first.
Right, and with our GIS system, we have the ability, and I'm sure the assessor's office gave you an idea of, certainly it's not going to be the final map, because then we would have to go to the map maker, but I think for the discussion of, the actual article and whether or not it is going to be too restrictive, that would be a helpful tool in flushing out that conversation.
Right.
And all I'm talking about during the discussion phase is literally take like a town map over there and get the list from the assessors of all the categories where the prohibited space are, and just do a ruler. That's all we're looking for initially, and then once, if it goes further, then we could expend funds. But the fact is, if it actually goes to town meeting, it has, according to town council, it has to have a map that you're adopting at the same time.
Okay.
Right, but the assessors we can do things a little better than the
Right.
ruler, because they have the ability to
Right.
do, to pinpoint those spots and then do that 1,000-foot radius, so they can draw that circumference.
Right, they
fairly
actually made up sites, like all individual, like the high school, they were able to
Yeah,
put up
we
certain sites.
have the tools to
I
do
wasn't-
that.
We're still figuring out how to make it on a, grand scale map.
I know you have definitions about where that 1,000-foot is. Is it from the end of the
Property line. to
property lines?
To the beginning of their property line,
Right.
so.
Jeez, okay, so that just makes drawing a map really crazy.
You'd effectively have another layer on the GIS map.
Right,
Right.
right.
So you just load in the things of, don't do it near here. They do it for zoning board of appeals, 300-foot abutter list. So
Right,
So,
once you get to that point, that'll be easy to do. There'll be some price, but it's,
And the other thing is MRPC, we have 8 hours of GIS time a year, free. So that may be an avenue to go, is to have them put it on the map. I know they have a GIS department, and they do a lot of GIS work for trails, et cetera. Might be worth inquiring from them whether or not they'd be able to put that on the town-wide map that you're talking about.
and what's going to happen when you make that map is you'll have a crosshatched or shaded red where you can't move, then you'll have a shaded green where you can, and everybody who lives in this green area is going to say, well, that's going to affect my property value, because now I can, whereas people inside are going to say, I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry that a sex offender is going to move next door to me. So it's a very dicey.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
But you do need the visual, you need,
Oh, no.
what does it mean?
Clearly, if you're going to make restrictions, you need to see visually where that affects. I mean, I think I'd be interested in knowing what it looked like.
Right.
So, and most of it can be done. I mean, again, you have a list of sites that people can't live close to, so, I mean,
I think that what you mentioned earlier is the bus stops and the camp stop, but that's part of a more of a difficult permanent issue.
Things that are in flux, you really
That
can't.
type of thing, as opposed, and you may want to go for something simpler and then see how it works and maybe add something later. So
Right, I mean,
that's-
bus stops change all the time, depending on the amount of kids that are along the route.
Yep.
And, I mean, it just changes all the time.
Okay, great.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
work.
any other questions for the chief or the lieutenant? I thank you for your time here, and again, for the other, so the first one, we recommended approval, the second one seems like it's headed that way, but we wanted some last-minute items on the fines. Number 3, with the pawnbrokers, looking like it's probably going to be a work in progress, and then this one, I'm going to let you decide when you talk to town council and talk to the town manager, what kind of resources you have to see if we can put this to something that can be satisfy town council, satisfy the board, and bring it to the residents, the voters.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Stay safe out there.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Are there any other discussion or review of warrant articles? Okay, do we have anybody we haven't met with, who have articles, who propose articles here?
No.
We've met with the planning board, we've met with the police department now. And the other articles are either from the board or from the town manager, or?
So next week, Article 9, the proposed budget adjustment article, we should take that up unless you're planning to have a meeting the last week of the month.
Well, we'll leave it, we'll leave it to decide next week if anything comes up. We should leave it open.
Yeah, we certainly
Because it is the
can.
last one before town meeting, so.
Even if we have to meet that morning,
Right. Which morning?
town meeting morning.
Oh, no, well, we'll always have that
Yeah, right,
posted. I'm
right.
talking about the last Tuesday in April, we may want to meet. The 28th. Okay, a minute, we did that. Okay, so committee reports, Board of Health,
No report?
Building Reuse,
No report,
Capital Planning,
no report,
Finance Committee,
no report.
Library Board of Trustees,
Meets next week?
MPO.
The meeting on April 8th, there were 4 presentations of potential articles to be, projects to be included in the 15-18 tip. The 16-19 tip. And the 4 projects that provided presentations were the Summer Street project, the intersection of Route 12 and Chocksett Road in Sterling, a project in Hubbardston, which is the resurfacing and work on Route 68. And then Arthur Frost of DOT gave an overview of what really is several projects, which is reconstruction and widening on Route 2 ramps at exits 35, 36, and 38. And it looks like that's really in the preliminary kind of fact-finding stage. But each project gave an overview. There wasn't a lot of discussion on the merits of each project. There was a note that Arthur Frost of DOT noted that they believe that the intersection project, which is currently in Sterling, which is currently in the 2018 tip, will be ready for construction in the 16 tip, which was surprising to me because they are not even at 25% design. I'm sorry, they are at 25% and they expect to be at 100% this summer, which is a really aggressive schedule. But there wasn't a lot of discussion on the merits of each project at the next meeting, at the next MPO meeting next month. That's when we'll start doing the deep dive into what projects to be included and what projects not to be included. But, you know, the tip every year is a changing project, and so my hope is that the Summer Street project continues to maintain support. It is the second highest rated project in the region as far as the scoring listing for need, so my hope is that we maintain that position and that we continue with the 2017 schedule. But as that discussion moves on, I will let everyone know. I actually had to leave the meeting right after that conclusion, so I don't know if Phyllis can fill us in on what happened, if anything, after that.
No, they just really talked about, you know, items a little bit more. What I did want to say was, it was great that Lunenburg had town manager representing us and DPW Director Roddiquins and yourself and myself, and none of the other items had anyone from the region at all.
Right. Right, and I think
the
that
support was obvious.
right, and you know, MRPC has continued to tell me that local support is critical to the movement of projects. So while there wasn't a lot of discussion about the Summer Street project, other than Trish made her presentation, and I actually added some discussion about the importance of the project for our region, not only from a pavement management standpoint, but from a drainage, from an economic development, from a safety concern, from the deterioration of the pavement. I mean, I kind of tried to hit on the reason why this is such an important project. But clearly the support was there for this project, and Mayor Wong was there as well. And there were representatives from the Fitchburg DPW as well. So I think that it's important. There were a number of people for this particular project, but as I said, the discussions, especially at next month meeting, is going to be the key component, because the hope is to release the tip for public comment after that next meeting in May. So at the latest, it would be the June meeting that it will be released for public comment. So the next 2 meetings are going to be crucial to determine where it falls in the project listing.
And George Kahanas mentioned our new MART service during the meeting as well, which began this Monday.
Excellent.
Great.
Planning board.
The planning board meeting last night, there was a lot of discussion about the VCD and the APD, and the historical commission was in attendance, or members of, not the entire commission. But there was a lot of discussion about whether or not to couple those bylaws together, and the end result was that the planning board did vote to couple the two articles together, meaning that if the APD does not pass, that they would pass over the VCD. The other big item that was talked about was the 790, 792 Mass Ave, the estate of Edward Riley, and as you know, there's an article on the warrant to rezone that property. The Rileys were there and expressed some concern about what the impact to the saleability of their property would be. Noted that their father had the business for over 55 years, and you know, it's a long-standing business, and it has been zoned commercial. But there was a lot of discussion about projects that they've had come forward that were not, according to the zoning officer, would not be allowed, and they offered some examples. So for example, there's a home that has a 6-bedroom home, and then the business, and when Mr. Riley owned it, they lived in the building, and then they had the package store. A number of people have expressed interest, and they've wanted to do, for example, a antique business or a bicycle shop, and live in the residence and operate the business. And they've been informed by the zoning officer that that would be prohibited. And so the discussion turned to, well, if it was limited business, would it be allowed? And several scenarios were brought up, such as the Harley House, which was the bed and breakfast, but now it's an antique shop. The Flower Barn, which was a residence and then started to operate a flower shop. There is a dog grooming business on Mass Ave. That's also a residence. So the discussion then turned to, if it's limited business, which those properties are, would those types of uses be allowed? So bottom line is the planning board continued discussion on this article, looking for additional clarification from the zoning officer, and informed the Rileys, and I'm sure that they'll be in attendance at the next meeting, which is on the 27th. The other topic of discussion that was interesting was the Highfield Village. Highfield Village came in again for yet another continuance. And what was brought up by Mr. Allison and Mr. Chen is they expressed concern with the validity of some of the data associated with the project. So, for example, the traffic study dates back to 2005, and whether or not that data is still relevant given the amount of time that's lapsed since the initial submission. So the applicant was seeking a extension because of some problems with the engineering firm. Apparently there's an illness with the individual, the engineer, and so now they're looking at possible other engineering firms. But there's a number of issues that remain unanswered. There were the peer reviewer brought up 156 items associated with the project that had concerns, and only less than half of those have been addressed. So the fact that those issues still haven't been addressed, the fact that the data is very old. The board did grant the continuance, but let the applicant know in no uncertain terms that they're going to look at this data and may. The discussion was if the board votes to deny it, the applicant then has the opportunity to come back and resubmit. The applicant raised the concern about the EIR, which they have done, and whether or not that would still be valid. But they did continue the meeting, but really let the applicant know that this project has to move forward. And I think that's it.
The other interesting thing about that is that there's a provision for subdivisions that only board members that were there when it was submitted can vote on approval.
Well, that question was raised, but I don't think it was really answered.
Well, what Adam said was that since Joanna's going off and Nathan is going off, it leaves the remaining three. The three of them could vote to do it if they want to. But there was the continuing issue of it's not a supermajority because that would have had to be 4 out of the 5, but they believe that it will be, although one member indicated that right now with the answers that they don't have, they'd be voting against it, and I believe the other one's probably been the same place, so.
Yeah, right now, it's honestly, it looks like there's a lot of work on this project, and unless a lot of those answers are provided, the board, I think, will vote to deny it. But it really is on the applicant now to provide the information and provide the updates and respond to the peer reviewers' questions. But it's a very aggressive timeline, so we'll see what happens.
So if they have to resubmit, it's like a fresh slate?
Yes. It can be, that was the other question, is it better to deny it or for the applicant to withdraw it? And so the applicant is going to look into that.
That was a long discussion.
Yeah.
I wanted to comment on the zoning issue because one of the important parts of that conversation was brought out by both, well, Mr. Allison and Mr. McQuaid, although everybody did touch on it. And that is, it has been a long time, and now this current planning board has really taken up the reins of actually looking at the zoning of the town. And part of that was the limited business residential portion, which, as Mr. Allison and I believe rightfully pointed out, is that just the definition of the zone indicates some kind of mixed use that would be intended, although it may not be written properly to do that. And they really expressed the desire to, and I know Mr. Chenis brought this up too, to look at that zone next, that maybe that whole definition of that one zoning title of limited business residential should be looked at, because I think a lot of people are looking at potentially living where they work and have living quarters in one part or one building even, and a shop, some kind of business entity on another floor, and I think that makes all the sense in the world, and that site would be perfect for it, because that's exactly what Mr. Riley did for all those years, was live there. So I was glad to hear them talk about that, and I think that would give the kind of potential revitalization to that whole corridor that's limited business residential that it doesn't potentially have, because those kind of opportunities have been denied. So.
Right, and that's one of the things that the Village Center District really encourages, is that type of mixed use. So
Let's give a village feel.
Right,
Right.
exactly.
And the ironic thing is that because it's zoned commercial, that's why it's been denied all along. So,
Yeah.
And communication wasn't it?
Okay, PAC,
No further report?
School Committee.
The school committee rescheduled their meeting from tomorrow night to the 30th. Now it's a Thursday, to have a joint meeting with building reuse. So that is a Thursday, huh?
Yes.
Usually, okay. The budget there are going to be budget recommendations to be presented as well. They sent out a packet, I think we all got it, and it's 32 pages, so I am not sure what's new and what's the same. I haven't had a chance to glean it thoroughly.
Well, it came this afternoon, so
Right.
can't believe you haven't looked it over in detail.
But you can get hard copies at the school department if
Right.
you want to physically have a hard copy.
School Building Committee met on Wednesday. The project is proceeding. They are doing, the steel work is basically completed. They are scheduling the ceremonial topping off ceremony, where they're going to have one of the elevator shaft beams painted so all the kids in the schools can sign it, and then during a school day, and that date has not been set, but it'll be the end of this month, and hopefully next Tuesday I'll be able to announce when that is, but it probably will be in the paper as well. So there'll be a topping off ceremony sometime in the afternoon or maybe in the late morning. The tiles and flooring colors and schemes were selected as well. Some of them have 3-month lead time, so they needed to get that, because that will be underway end of August, beginning of September, where the interior work will be done. Right now, they're doing all the slab on grade. They did the one pour already, slab on deck, that was done in Building A several weeks ago. but all the other ones are underway. All the tamping of the ground floor layer so that the concrete can be laid on the ground. All the mechanical work all the trenching is being done, so lots and lots of activity. I mean, it will be a very, very busy summer, fall, spring, a lot to be done, but it's all going well. They are still working with the snow delay that happened, so that put them approximately 6 weeks behind or so. So they're working with the schedule as best they can to try to make up that time. And they're still hoping to make it up in the schedule without using any weekend or overtime to keep the contingency untouched as best as possible. At some point, there becomes a point where you have to make a decision because we have to get the building done within a specific time frame for the start of the school year, a year and a half or a year and 3 months from now. Otherwise, everything, and we were very pleased so far that during all this, no complaints are being lodged, and the site is really being handled in a very professional way. In the beginning, any complaints or any inquiries that were sent to the person in charge at the site manager, has been handled, and it's been, very smooth sailing from that point. So we're hoping that continues, because the relationship to the neighbors and the abutters is obviously critical, as critical as the building itself. So and that is that report. The next site will be, the next meeting, which will be in May, will be on site again. So now that there's, at that point in May, hopefully no snow left on the ground. But we never know. Sewer Commission.
Sewer Commission meeting tonight. They're continuing work on enforcement of the grease trap in order to eliminate grease from the system, and working on the extension of the sewer in Pratt and Lakeview. It looks like they may be able to incorporate the extension on Pleasant View into the revolving loan process, so we may be able to get a reduction of rates as well as that.
Excellent. Town manager reports.
Just one item to mention. We are in the process of transitioning our emergency notification system from Blackboard Connect to Code Red. We made the decision to do that for financial reasons. Code Red provides the same service, and it's about $2,000 less a year, so it was a substantial savings. There's no impact to residents. All of the data will be migrated from one system to the other electronically. So the only difference that people will notice is when we're going live with Code Red, which should be around May 1st, the notification on the website will look different. So, and that's only for people who might want to add a new cell phone number or an email or something like that. But the system works the same. We have the ability to send out, a broad, to cover the whole town, or to do a targeted area if we have a specific concern. So it really, the end user isn't going to see any difference. It really was just for financial reasons.
So you actually can add a cell phone you can go online and add a number?
You can, each household can add up to 4 numbers, and then you can add email addresses as well.
Oh.
Code Red's and so
When
serious,
will the
too.
new system come up?
May 1st is what we're looking to do. They're actually giving us 2 free months, the month of May and month of June, so that's an added bonus.
Okay, no interviews, appointments, reappointments, or resignations. We do have an executive session, but before we read that in, does anybody on the board have any final public comment?
Yes, I have a couple. I went online, and the Talent Bank form is now up on the homepage. It's on the left-hand corner, and you can click on it. You can fill out your your requested. You can put the number next to where you want to serve, and you can email it to Elaine Peterson. So it's gotten much more accessible.
Great.
Excellent. I've taken a break over the last few meetings because I'm going to talk to the town moderator, put a full court press when we have people in seats at town meeting we still have openings, we still have a finance committee opening, we have a PAC opening, we have, I don't know if anybody's running for planning board. I mean, I guess we're going to have write-ins, or I don't know how that's going to work. So lots of openings, places.
Park commissioners, planning.
Park commissioners, I think. Is there still a conservation? Is there one?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think there's one, yeah. So, can we
Oh,
make
and
sure we have that at town meeting as a handout?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's on the
good.
list.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
I also wanted to mention that MART is considering a fare and bus route changes, an increase in the rates, because the state's getting fussy with these people and saying they can't operate with a deficit anymore. So they're going to have 3 meetings. The first will be April 15th at 5:30 PM in the MART Intermodal Center in Fitchburg. And if you call a day ahead, they'll provide you with a ride there and back. The second meeting will be April 21st at the Gardner City Hall at 5:30. And the third will be April 22nd at 5:30 in Leominster. And you can arrange for rides to any of those locations if you're interested.
Thank you. Any other public comment from the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was looking forward to our 7 o'clock appointment, but I did want to mention that we will, in fact, have a Memorial Day service this year. I met briefly with Doreen Noble, who seems to be the keeper of past documentation today, and I'm reaching out to the Boy Scouts and several other groups to see if people want to be involved. We would welcome anybody who wants to be involved, either in the planning or the actual ceremony on that day. I believe it'll be on Memorial Day, but that hasn't been totally finalized yet. Particularly interested in service members, either veterans or active duty service members who would like to participate, and they can get in touch with me. I'm kind of quarterbacking it at this point, and if we put a committee together, we'll kind of formalize that. But I can be contacted either at jtoll at Lunenburg Online or at my home. All my contact information is available at jamietoll.com.
Excellent. Any other? Okay, so any public comment from the public? So we are going to, I would entertain a motion, we go into executive session pursuant to Chapter 30A, Section 21A, subsection 9, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the government's bargaining or litigating position, and the chair so declares. This is concerning Local Union 39 collective bargaining agreement with the DPW employees. We will not be returning to open session.
Before someone makes a motion, I just want to, for sake of clarity, I have recused myself from any discussion regarding the clerical contract, which affects my daughter. This contract does not affect the clerical personnel, so therefore I can participate. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, I just, so the public is aware, it does not affect
So
any
moved.
member of my family.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Alderman Hall, I'm supposed to Mrs. Luck.
Aye.
Mr. Ebersol.
Aye.
Mr. Toll.
Aye.
Mrs. Bertram.
Aye.
And I for myself. Good night, everyone, and we will see you next week, April 21st at 7 o'clock. Thank you.